time to do to Rand Paul's speech what Vanilla Ice does halfway through every song. Break it down! So for starters, Rand Paul says he is different. He says he's not like those other Republicans. So to make his point, today, Rand Paul waged war.
As I watch our once great economy collapse under mounting spending and debt, I think, what kind of America will our grandchildren see? It seems to me that both parties and the entire political system are to blame. Under the watch of both parties, the poor seem to get poorer and the rich get richer. Too often, when Republicans have won, we have squandered our victory by becoming part of the Washington machine. That's not who I am.
That is Rand Paul, Mark, really being a different kind of Republican. I've not heard many presidential candidates announcing their presidential bids attacking their own party. Not a common thing. Now, granted, he attacked both parties in the system, but still, that's an unusual kind of stance to try to take a kind of political anti-establishment posture that is very, very gratuitous and very much out front. I don't know if that's the way to win, as someone would put it, but it certainly was striking today to hear him talk that way.
Now, look, it leaves him vulnerable. There's part of the reason why you don't hear a lot of Republicans coming to his defense when he's being attacked by a new television ad is because he attacks the party. And it's a very delicate balance. People in the party, establishment, members of Congress say, we agree with his goal of expanding the party. We recognize there's anger at the Republican Party. But as you suggest, a lot of them don't want to see one of their leading Republican presidential candidates say a pox on both the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, there's a little Ross Perot in that message there. And you kind of think to yourself, you know, if you were an independent candidate running for president or a third-party candidate running against the two parties, that would make a lot of sense. But, boy, in this Republican nominating electorate, I just don't know that there is enough of an audience that wants to hear the Republican Party denounced in quite that full-throated a way. I think he's going to have to be a little careful there, or he's going to get himself in trouble.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how much he sticks with that, particularly in Republican debates and in front of Republican crowds. All right, moving on. Another clip on a big issue for this guy, which is economic populism. He's someone who wants to make the case that often sounds like a Democrat in talking about changing the balance of how the United States, the federal government, does its business. Listen.
Can you imagine what $1 billion stimulus could do for Detroit or for Appalachia? I'm convinced that most Americans want to work. I want to free up the great engine of American prosperity. I want to see millions of Americans back at work. In my vision for America, we'll bring back manufacturing jobs that pay well. More than $2 trillion in American profit currently sits overseas. In my vision for America, new highways and bridges will be built across the country, not by raising your taxes, but by lowering the tax to bring this American profit home.
John, it sounds like Barack Obama circa 2008. Bring money home from foreign corporations and build roads and bridges in America. Yes,
well, I mean, there's an odd thing about it, right? I mean, he kind of had, in the speech, there's an attack on crony capitalism. There's an element, as you know, the Tea Party, Occupy Wall Street, both had a certain kind of, they didn't like big business, they didn't like big government, they didn't like the special interest. There's a little bit of that in Rand Paul. And then at the same time, he's talking about a corporate tax holiday in order to try to bring that money home. So that sounds like a little bit like a special interest tax break to me. So there's a little bit of intellectual confusion going on there, but there's no doubt that he's trying to tap into something that is broadly felt by a lot of working class voters in both parties. There's no doubt about that.
And for those who think this is all a mirage and his message is not going to find a big audience in the Republican Party, you just need to think back to Pat Buchanan, who had comparable rhetoric as a Republican presidential candidate, got big reaction from the crowds, seemed like he was a real threat, and then somehow ended up being more of a paper tiger than a real threat.
Yeah, hard to forget that great race in 1996. Go, Pat, go. Mark, give us the next one, this next clip.
Okay, so one thing about Rand Paul is, to paraphrase Mario Cuomo, his speech today and most of his rhetoric in general is all prose, no poetry. So he wrote into his announcement speech today a very nice story, very well written, about helping a couple in Guatemala who had failing eyesight. Listen to how he tells this story, draining it of all the intended effect.
One day in Guatemala, a man arrived and told me that I had operated on his wife the day before. His wife could see clearly for the first time in years, and she had begged him to get on the bus, travel the winding roads, and come back to our surgery center. He too was nearly blind from hardened cataracts. After his surgery, the next day, his wife sat next to me. As I unveiled the patch from his eyes, it was a powerful, emotional moment for me to see them looking at each other clearly for the first time in years, to see the face they loved again. As I saw the joy in their eyes, I thought, this is why I became a doctor.
I don't want to diminish his great work in Guatemala. I don't want to diminish what he said was an emotional moment. But if that is the way he tells an emotional story on the day of his announcement, I think he's going to have trouble connecting with people who want a president who speaks not just to their head, but to their heart and their gut.
Well, you want to do a little compare and contrast here. You think back to Ted Cruz and the other full-throated presidential announcement that we've seen. Ted Cruz with all that rhetorical fire, deeply emotional. I mean, whatever you think about Ted Cruz's policies and ideology, the performance level was so high and felt so earnest and so sincere, so well executed. This felt, I thought, like you, Mark, very wooden, very rote. This is the one thing that Rand Paul does not seem to have. I've not seen from him much of a sense of humor, nor much of a sense of emotion. And this is a moment that you would think that emotion would come relatively easily. If you can't summon emotion on the day you're announcing for the President of the United States, hard to think of when you are going to summon that emotion. But you're right, voters want to see it, and he's going to have to find a way to get there.
And my fingertip feel in the room was that portion of the speech, I made it when I did my report card on his event, I thought it was the weakest part of the whole speech, because in the room, that crowd just was not swept away. Now, again, his supporters are drawn to the liberty agenda. They're drawn to his ideas in general, and he's simply the messenger. But if you're going to be commander-in-chief, president of the United States, in the living room every day for 4 years, I just think the performance level on that was not very good. They showed a video before the speech where they told much the same story and a related one about his grandmother. The video executed. Senator Paul, I don't think, did on that.
Right. It is not personal anecdotes and elements of humanity that seem to fire Rand Paul up. It is ideas and causes, and there's no cause that means more to him, that has been more of a signature cause for him than the cause of civil liberties. Let's take a listen to this last soundbite and then talk about it a little, this one on civil liberties.
Warrantless searches of America's phones and computer records are un-American and a threat to our civil liberties. I say that your phone records are yours. I say the phone records of law-abiding citizens are none of their damn business.
No absence of emotion there, Mark, even a profanity from Rand Paul. That is something he cares a lot about. If he could summon that kind of emotion when he's telling a personal story, he'd be in good shape on the thing we were criticizing him for a few seconds ago.
Yeah, the room was filled with young people, many more than you'd normally see at a Republican announcement, and they are fired up by that issue. He knows it, and that's one where he does have a fingertip feel for how to play to the crowd's emotions as well as their heads. He
was so fired up at one point that he said he wanted to hold the Constitution in his left hand and the Bill of Rights in his right hand. I wanted to let him know that he could keep one hand free because the Bill of Rights is actually in the Constitution anyway.